appreciated. Duncan Hames.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'd first like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Arfon for securing this important and timely debate and thank the Minister for her attendance. The Government's proposals for welfare reform are undeniably substantial, but reform is undeniably due. The best elements of the wider proposals have the potential to create a simpler, fairer and more efficient system than the current array of credits, benefits and allowances that developed under the last government. However, the proposals which have caused the greatest consternation amongst my constituents, and it's clear from the attendance today from colleagues from all parts of this House, are proposed changes to the mobility component of Disability Living Allowance. This issue presents a particularly difficult balancing act to reform a complex welfare system, but never to jeopardise the ability of disabled people to live full, independent and active lives. And I think today we've been right to stop to determine what considers a modern, efficient and most importantly a fair system for meeting the mobility needs of disabled people. I've actively expressed my opposition to a proposed withdrawal of the mobility component of Disability Living Allowance for those living in residential care homes. And I'm grateful for the time that the Minister has spent listening and talking with me about this issue, both on the floor of the House and separately. Without their mobility component, many of the most vulnerable people in our society would quite simply be unable to meet the costs of living independent and fulfilling lives, to engage in the social activities that most of us take for granted. And as I politely suggested to the Prime Minister, parallels drawn between those in hospitals and residential care homes are crude and unfair when addressing this particular issue. But it's clear that the Minister herself, in her own investigation of this matter, has reached much wider in concerning the issues at hand. And I think those of us that have had most reservations about this should also recognise the efforts that the Minister has gone to get a far clearer handle on this issue than perhaps those that had looked at it previously. I certainly associate myself with the remarks made by the Honourable Member for Banbury, who demonstrated a very clear understanding of some of the issues around care home funding. In light of the responses to the proposals that the government first tabled and the representations made by me and many others in this House, I warmly welcome the Minister's decision to postpone the change until the nature of mobility funding for those in care homes is fully understood. It is absolutely essential that we don't rush into any of these changes, and it's good news that the Minister is listening and accepts that we need to take a longer, clearer look at this issue. Given her intention to give due consideration to the mobility needs of those in residential care homes before moving forward with any changes, I'd ask the Minister to consider two issues in particular as part of the development of wider changes to DLA. Firstly, the process of medical assessment for personal independence payments. And secondly, how support is given to those, how the support given to those in residential care homes can be most effectively personalised. On assessment, the Government has stated its intention to medically assess all those currently in receipt of DLA. Now, while assessment can bring advantages, ensuring that this help goes to those who need it most, potentially even making it easier for some disabled people to claim, and allowing provision of more individualised support, there are also pitfalls and possible side effects. One is the issue of cost, both the cost of contracting out the assessments and the cost of financing the appeals that are bound to follow in the wake of any large-scale programme of assessment. There is also the pain of the face-to-face assessment may inflict on those suffering from autism and similar disabilities. There is the danger that assessment of mobility needs of those with spectrum disorders, mental health issues and fluctuating conditions such as Parkinson's may be prone to error unless conducted by specialists. And this is certainly a problem that we have seen in the conduct of work capability assessments for employment support allowance.
Certainly. I thank the Honourable very much for giving way.
would he also agree, and he might be about to cover this, there is also a question mark about the need for repeated assessments in certain conditions. I think particularly of those who are blind, and I speak as a Vice Chairman of the APPG on eye health and visual impairment. There are some conditions that are never going to change, including perhaps loss of a limb, and there may be more costs incurred in reassessment than are actually necessary.
I think the Honourable Lady makes an exceptionally good point, and it's certainly said here in my future notes that there is potential for certain conditions, such as blindness, to benefit from an automatic entitlement. What I would like to suggest is a tiered approach would be worth examining, in which a paper-based assessment would be sufficient for those with the most obvious need, eliminating the requirement for a detailed and stressful face-to-face assessment. I'd like to also say a word about personalisation, something which I support in much of the government's statements about its reforms. This could actually prove quite helpful for addressing the alleged duplication that has been spoken of in funding for care home residents. For the suggestion that I've made to the Minister previously and will continue to share is that were the funds currently allocated to local authorities by local authorities to care homes for meeting the assessed needs of residents were transferred directly to residents as part of their personal independence payment, it would ensure that the freedom, choice and independence currently offered by the mobility component of DLA is maintained. It would also ensure that the money given to the care homes for the use of their residents was actually used by the residents and not lost in administration or meeting of other costs. Now, this isn't what has been proposed to date, but I think it is very much in tune with the thrust of many other government changes, and I hope that it will be considered. The current confusion, shall we say, over where responsibility lies for the funding of mobility needs of those in residential care homes does point to the need for reform. However, the fundamental reference point for that reform must be a guarantee that those people who live with disabilities should still be supported to live active and fulfilling lives. I'll just finish by reiterating my welcome for the Minister's decision to look again at the support given to those in local authority funded care homes, and by reiterating my hope that she will investigate the suggestions I have raised today, which are among several constructive suggestions raised in the course of this debate.
Gotobe.